Look at a giant panda and try to convince yourself it's a real animal. Those round black patches around dopey eyes, that clumsy waddle, the way they tumble off branches like they've never seen a tree before. It's almost impossible to believe that millions of years of ruthless natural selection, the same process that created apex predators and survival machines, somehow produced this fluffy ball of evolutionary mistakes. And yet here they are, clinging to existence despite doing absolutely everything wrong. Most animals evolve to become better at surviving. Pandas evolved to become spectacular at almost going extinct. They've made every possible wrong choice along the evolutionary path, turned their backs on common sense, and somehow convinced themselves that the worst possible lifestyle was actually genius. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. They're still here. Against all logic, against all odds, these walking contradictions refuse to disappear. So what exactly went so catastrophically wrong, and how are they still breathing? Let's start with their most baffling decision, choosing to eat exclusively bamboo. Imagine being offered a buffet of delicious, protein-packed meat, and instead deciding to survive on poisonous sticks with virtually no nutritional value. That's essentially what pandas did around 6 million years ago. They went from being proper bears, relatives of grizzlies and polar bears, to becoming nature's most inefficient vegans. Bamboo is so nutritionally bankrupt that pandas have to spend 12 to 14 hours every single day just stuffing their faces to avoid starvation. We're talking about consuming 26 to 84 pounds of bamboo daily. That's like a human eating 300 hamburgers just to get enough calories to function. But here's where it gets truly ridiculous. Bamboo isn't just useless, it's actively trying to harm them. This innocent-looking plant is loaded with cyanide, nature's own chemical weapon. Most mammals would drop dead from eating the amount of bamboo pandas casually munch through every day. Pandas are essentially chain-smoking cyanide sticks, and somehow walking away unharmed. Other animals look at bamboo and think, nope, that'll end me. Pandas look at it and think breakfast, lunch, dinner, and 17 snacks. And just to make this dietary disaster even more absurd, pandas still have the wrong equipment for the job. Evolution typically fine-tunes animals over millions of years, right? Well, pandas apparently missed that memo completely. Despite eating nothing but plants for millions of years, they still have the digestive system of a meat eater. Their guts are short and simple, designed for processing protein, not breaking down tough plant fibers. It's like trying to run a smartphone on a car battery. Technically possible, but spectacularly inefficient. The result? They can only digest about 20% of everything they eat. 20%. Imagine if you could only absorb 1/5 of your food's nutrition. You'd be eating constantly just to stay alive, which is exactly what pandas do. And all that undigested bamboo has to go somewhere, which explains why pandas poop more than 40 times per day. They're essentially living, breathing poop factories, powered by the world's worst fuel source. But that wasn't the whole story of their dietary dysfunction. Scientists recently discovered something that makes this bamboo obsession even more tragic. Around 4.2 million years ago, pandas lost their ability to taste umami, the savory, delicious flavor that makes meat irresistible to carnivores. They literally evolved to not enjoy the food they were designed to eat. It's like voluntarily giving yourself taste bud damage so you can't appreciate pizza anymore. They traded the ability to enjoy nutritious, energy-dense meat for nothing. They just gave up one of life's greatest pleasures and got absolutely nothing in return. This means that somewhere in panda evolutionary history, there was a generation that could still taste how amazing meat was, watching their offspring gradually lose interest in the good stuff. Imagine being the last panda who could truly appreciate a nice piece of fish, knowing your children would find it bland and boring. What a depressing way to watch your species commit dietary suicide. Now you might think, okay, their food choice is terrible, but at least they can reproduce efficiently to make up for it, right? Wrong. So incredibly wrong. Wrong. So incredibly wrong. Pandas have managed to make reproduction nearly impossible for themselves, like they're actively trying to win some sort of extinction speedrun challenge. First, because each panda needs massive amounts of bamboo, they can't live near each other. Wild pandas are forced into solitary lives, maintaining territories of up to 6.5 square kilometers just to find enough food. They're basically hermits by necessity, using scent markings to avoid each other most of the year. It's like they've created their own social distancing protocols, except instead of lasting a few months, it's their entire lifestyle. But here's where it gets absolutely maddening. Female pandas are only fertile for 2 to 7 days per year. Not per month, per year. They get one microscopic window annually where pregnancy is possible. And if they miss it, better luck next time. And remember, they're living miles apart in mountainous terrain, communicating through scent messages, like some sort of ancient pheromone-based postal service. So picture this. A female panda leaves a scent message saying, "Hey, I'll be ready to mate for exactly 3 days, starting next Tuesday." The male panda gets this message, has to hike potentially dozens of miles through rugged mountains, time his arrival perfectly, and hope he doesn't get lost or distracted by some particularly appealing bamboo along the way. It's like trying to coordinate a dinner date using smoke signals while living in different time zones. And if they somehow manage this logistical nightmare and actually mate successfully, the female panda will be pregnant for 5 months before giving birth to cubs that are about 1/800th her size, basically the size of a stick of butter. But wait, it gets worse. Half of all panda pregnancies result in twins, which sounds like good news until you realize that mother pandas typically abandon the weaker twin because they can only care for one cub at a time. Imagine being so bad at parenting that having 2 babies is actually a crisis. Most animals see twins as doubling their genetic success. Pandas see twins as an impossible choice between which child gets to live. It's like they've evolved to be heartbroken by their own reproduction. But the most bewildering panda behavior was discovered only recently, and it's so bizarre that scientists spent years trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Pandas have been observed deliberately rolling around in horse poop, covering themselves from head to toe in fresh manure with the enthusiasm of a kid jumping in a pile of leaves. We're talking full body immersion, really getting into all the nooks and crannies, making sure every inch of their fur gets properly coated in excrement. For years, scientists assumed this was just pandas being weird for the sake of being weird. Like maybe they just really enjoyed the smell. But recently, researchers noticed something interesting. Pandas seem to engage in this poop-rolling behavior most frequently during cold weather. Could this gross habit actually serve some survival purpose? To test this theory, scientists did what scientists do. They covered mice in horse poop compounds and observed their behavior on cold surfaces. And surprisingly, the poop-treated mice seemed more comfortable in cold conditions, huddling together less and moving around more readily on chilly surfaces. It turns out that certain compounds in horse manure can inhibit cold receptors, essentially numbing the sensation of feeling cold. So pandas might be using horse poop as a sort of natural anesthetic to help them endure brutal Chinese winters without hibernating. It's like they've discovered nature's most disgusting version of numbing cream. But here's the thing. This might actually be a terrible adaptation. If pandas can't feel cold properly, they might not seek appropriate shelter when they really need it, potentially putting themselves in serious danger. So even their attempts at problem solving might be making their survival odds worse. It's like solving a headache by hitting yourself in the foot, technically distracting, but not really addressing the core issue. Some scientists aren't even convinced the poop rolling serves any purpose beyond pure enjoyment, which means pandas might just really love rolling in manure for the sheer fun of it. Either way, whether it's a misguided survival strategy or just a weird hobby, it's not exactly the behavior you'd expect from a species trying to cling to existence. And yet, somehow, this is where the panda story gets genuinely fascinating instead of just depressing. Because despite being evolution's most spectacular failure, pandas have developed some surprisingly clever workarounds for their impossible lifestyle. Remember that cyanide problem? Well, pandas have cultivated a specific type of bacteria in their guts called Pseudomonas fluorescens that helps break down cyanide compounds, essentially giving them a built-in detox system. They're like living chemistry labs, using microscopic partners to neutralize the poison they voluntarily consume every day. And while pandas do eat almost exclusively bamboo, they're actually strategic about which parts they choose. Young bamboo shoots contain significantly more protein than mature stalks, and pandas have learned to time their feeding to target the most nutritious portions available. They're essentially practicing precision foraging, maximizing whatever nutrition they can extract from their terrible food choice. In fact, when scientists analyzed the nutritional content of what pandas actually consume versus just generic bamboo, they discovered something surprising. Pandas managed to get about the same amount of protein as wild carnivores, despite eating nothing but plants. They've essentially figured out how to game the system, turning a nutritionally bankrupt food source into something barely adequate for survival. Their metabolism has also adapted in remarkable ways. Pandas burn energy at only about 38% the rate of other mammals their size. They're essentially running in extreme power-saving mode 24/7, like a smartphone that's always on low battery mode. Every movement is calculated for maximum efficiency, every behavior designed to conserve precious energy. This might explain why pandas appear so clumsy and lazy. They're not actually incompetent. They're just choosing the lowest energy solution to every problem. Sometimes the most efficient way to get down from a tree is to just fall and roll. Why waste energy on careful climbing when gravity can do the work for free? They've turned physics into a lifestyle choice. But here's the truly mind-bending part of this evolutionary puzzle. How did pandas end up making such apparently terrible decisions in the first place? Why would natural selection, which usually punishes bad choices ruthlessly, allow pandas to survive long enough to become such spectacular disasters? The answer lies in timing and opportunity. About 6 to 7 million years ago, bamboo forests dominated the landscape where pandas live. Unlike other food sources that came and went with seasons or climate changes, bamboo was incredibly abundant, fast-growing, and reliable. Some bamboo species can grow over 3 feet in a single day and reach full height in just 2 months. It was like discovering an unlimited buffet that never closed. More importantly, almost no other animals were eating bamboo because of its low nutrition and toxic properties. While other species competed fiercely for meat, fruits, and high-quality plant foods, bamboo represented an entirely untapped resource. Pandas essentially found an ecological niche that nobody else wanted, like being the only person willing to eat the cafeteria's least popular dish, and therefore never having to wait in line. At the time, this probably seemed like evolutionary genius. They developed that pseudo-thumb, essentially an extra digit formed from an enlarged wrist bone, specifically for grasping bamboo stalks. They were becoming specialists in a field with no competition, securing a food source that was both abundant and renewable. But specialization always comes with risks. The more specialized you become, the more vulnerable you are to changes in your environment. And pandas became the ultimate specialists, betting their entire evolutionary future on bamboo remaining abundant and accessible forever. Which brings us to the final chapter of the panda story, the part where humans entered the picture and made everything exponentially worse. Even if pandas were already on a questionable evolutionary path, human development accelerated their decline dramatically. Starting in the 1700s, expanding agriculture and growing human populations began fragmenting panda habitats. Roads, railways, and settlements carved up the continuous bamboo forests that pandas depended on, creating isolated patches of suitable habitat separated by miles of human development. Remember, pandas already had trouble finding each other to mate when they lived in continuous forests. Now they had to somehow navigate around human infrastructure while maintaining their impossible social distancing requirements. Today, fewer than 1,900 pandas survive in the wild, scattered across fragmented reserves that often aren't large enough to support even a few individuals long term. It's like forcing people to live in separate apartments spread across different cities, and then wondering why they're having trouble starting families. Poaching also devastated panda populations, as their distinctive pelts became valuable commodities. Pandas were already terrible at avoiding danger. Adding human hunters to their list of problems was like giving a blindfolded person a more complicated obstacle course to navigate. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Humans, having nearly driven pandas to extinction, decided to become obsessed with saving them. Massive conservation efforts, captive breeding programs, and protected reserves have stabilized panda populations and even allowed for slight increases in recent years. Critics often argue that pandas represent a massive misallocation of conservation resources, that the millions of dollars spent on panda preservation could save dozens of other species that might have better long-term survival prospects. They're probably right from a purely practical standpoint. Pandas are expensive, difficult to breed, and require enormous territories to maintain viable wild populations. But pandas have become something more than just another endangered species. They've become symbols of conservation itself, ambassadors for the idea that humans have a responsibility to protect the natural world, even when, especially when, that world includes creatures that seem determined to self-destruct. And maybe that's actually the most important lesson from the panda story. Evolution isn't about creating perfect organisms. It's about creating organisms that are good enough to survive in specific circumstances. Pandas aren't failures. They're specialists who got caught in an evolutionary trap when their circumstances changed faster than they could adapt. In their original bamboo forest environment, pandas were actually reasonably successful. They found an abundant food source, developed the tools to exploit it, and maintained stable populations for millions of years. They only became failures when their highly specialized lifestyle met the rapid environmental changes brought by human development. The real question isn't whether pandas deserve to survive. It's whether we, as the species responsible for disrupting their evolutionary strategy, have an obligation to help them adapt to the world we've created. Pandas didn't choose to become conservation icons, but they've ended up representing something profound about the relationship between human progress and natural preservation. Looking at pandas today, rolling around in horse poop and falling off tree branches, it's easy to see them as cute but hopeless evolutionary dead ends. But they've survived ice ages, climate changes, and millions of years of environmental challenges by being just adaptable enough, just clever enough, and just lucky enough to keep going. Maybe that's not such a bad evolutionary strategy after all. Maybe being the lovable disaster that everyone wants to protect is actually a form of genius we're only beginning to understand. In a world dominated by humans, sometimes the best survival strategy isn't being the fittest, it's being the most impossible to give up on. That's a wrap on today's wild journey. But here at the Zoo-phoria show, we're just getting started exploring nature's most incredible stories. Subscribe if you want to keep discovering the shocking, hilarious, and downright unbelievable truths about the animals sharing our planet. Your next favorite animal fact is just one click away.